So nice to be here today. And I saw some of you on Friday night when I was doing the show here that I've been in the process of creating called the Bible Cabaret, a music and comedy review starring the Old and New Testaments, where we've been exploring how the Bible indeed may be a comedy, may have intended to be a comedy from the very first, from cover to cover. That's been lost, and one of the things I like to do and I feel called to do is help people think about how that spirit might be brought back into our work and into our lives and into all the opportunities that being people of God bring us. And one of the ways that I have been doing that is taking some texts and exploring what the comic possibilities of those might be and looking at how those stories might be funny because they sort of resonate with funny stories from our own lives. And that's something I encourage all of us to do, think about the funny stories from our lives and how they may resonate with scriptures in ways that we are now only beginning to understand. So here is, a piece from my show that does all of that. Don't you hate it when you hate something and then you hate that you hate it? And then you hate that you hate that you hate it, because now you have all this hate in your heart that isn't very good, and it's all about something that you hate that you hate. What I'm talking about is Valentine's Day. Stupid holiday, hateful holiday, especially if you're single and sorely feel it. But then it's a stupid day, so how stupid to hate it, right? So what if you don't have anyone to spend it with? So what? And then you start feeling all sad and lonely and like this big loser. And then what happens to me, I start feeling like I'm one of the characters on the Brady Bunch. Remember that 70s sitcom about the woman with 3 girls with hair of gold and the boys with the dad with all had perms? And big hit in America, and I think probably a big hit here, and I feel like I'm one of those characters. And that's so stupid and embarrassing to feel like one of them when they're feeling like that, all bummed out about not having dates on Friday night and all that stuff. Ugh. I know that Valentine's Day was originally named after Saint Valentine, an early Christian martyr and bishop of the early church who refused to follow Rome's edict to stop all weddings of Roman soldiers because the empire was afraid that newly married soldiers wouldn't want to fight in wars anymore. I know. Valentine's Day is really a celebration of Christian pacifism. I know that now, but I didn't know that then, 30 years ago. I didn't think I knew anything. Back in the 80s, when I was in my 20s. And I was living in Chicago, trying to become a comedian, a successful comedian, the funniest woman in America. And it was one Valentine's Day in those days, and I got a phone call from the manager of the comedy club where I most often performed, the Chicago Comedy Showcase, which, by the way, was housed in a former church, FYI. And I got this call from him, and I was a little surprised. I hadn't heard from him for a while. We hadn't talked because, you see, I hadn't performed in a while. When I'd first moved to Chicago after college, I tried doing stand-up for a few times, and every time I did, I bombed horribly. It's very different from being the life of the party and standing before a bunch of people who have paid you to amuse them. I had decided it was time already to go on hiatus. But this guy called me and he said, I'm thinking of having a Valentine's Day show at the club. It's just another day away, and was wondering if you'd like to be a part. I was like, wow, well, maybe we're having a show, I thought, because it's Valentine's Day in the middle of the week and want to have something different to do. Or maybe he hated Valentine's Day the way I did and called me figuring I wouldn't have anything better to do. I hated thinking that might be the reason I was called. But And then I was thinking, well, I don't know if I could be part of the show. That's what he wanted me to do, was to do some material for Valentine's Day, because I didn't have an act yet. I hadn't performed in a while. I wasn't feeling all that funny. But I hated all that a lot less than I hated Valentine's Day. So I said, sure, I'll give it a shot. So I put down the phone, and the minute I did, it came to me. I remembered that someone had once told me that February 14th is not just Valentine's Day, it's also Florence Henderson's birthday. I mean, who else but Mrs. Brady would be born on Valentine's Day, right? So I knew exactly what I would do. We would have a little birthday party for Florence Henderson. Screw Valentine's Day. We were going to do something much more festive. And I knew exactly how it would start. Musical chairs. Because it's a birthday party, right? I'd bring up volunteers from the audience, and we would circle around an ever smaller number of chairs to the music of Song of Norway, this big Hollywood box office musical bomb about Edvard Grieg, and it starred Florence Henderson, and I had the album, and I had a little portable record player, and I had a jar of Wesson oil, so I could give that to the winner of the musical chairs, because Florence Henderson did all those Wessonality commercials back in the day. I was so excited. And then I knew what we would do second. We would play Pin the Weird Flip on the back of Mrs. Brady's hair. And the winner would win a jar of Tang. And then instead of Happy Birthday, we would all sing the Brady Bunch theme, and the best singer would win a pantsuit. It was great because in those days you could get them by 50 cents. And here's the actual pantsuit that Brady Bunch. Let's see it. Yeah, baby. Woo, woo. That's right. Work it, baby. Yes. Fresh from the bicentennial, we had a lovely plaid red, white, and blue pantsuit. You can move around in it. You can jump around in it. You can even take a knee in it. There you go. Yeah. That's the pantsuit, folks. It was so, and you know what? You're probably wondering, Jane, how in the world do you still have that pantsuit if you gave it away to the best Brady Bunch singer? Well, you see, the first winner of that was my sister, who's a professional singer, and then she gave it back to me. She said, Jane, I think you're going to need that pantsuit more than I do. So clearly she is owed. And I was thrilled, because it had been I'd had a great time. It was quite a success, this Florence Henderson birthday party for Valentine's Day, and the audience loved it. They loved playing the games. They loved winning the prizes or giving them back, and I was so thrilled because I knew now I had an act. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to come on stage and always give my audience the experience of something like a Florence Henderson birthday party. So I became the Czarina of fun. And every time I came on stage, we would do things like have a Elvis trivia contest. And the right answers would win Smarties, and bad answers would win Dum-Dums. And sometimes we would have live decoupage. And sometimes I would read my mother's letters. And sometimes I would even play a medley of Bread songs. Remember that band Bread? And I would play them on my oboe. I called it my Breadly, and it was really fun because there's nothing like hearing Baby I'ma Want You while you're standing up doing this. And always, 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 at the end of my act, we would sing the Brady Bunch theme song, and the best singer won a pantsuit. Just like this one. Ladies and gentlemen, another one of those pantsuits. That's right. Woohoo! Oh, yeah. It's a little bit earthy, a little bit fuzzy, a little bit rock and roll, a little bit country. Yeah, you work it, girl. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, power pantsuits. Don't mess with her. That's right. Nope, nope, nope. Yes, these are the kind of pantsuits that I would give away, but I wasn't giving away. Yes. I wouldn't give away all of them because they were starting to become even more precious than before. And you know, I was collecting more and more pantsuits because my act was going better and better. I was getting groupies. I was appearing on local talk shows. I even got flown to my alma mater of Oberlin College in Oberlin, Ohio, to MC their B-Movie Festival. This was fabulous. So I moved then to LA to further my career and become ever closer to becoming the funniest woman in America. And while I was there, I met the cast of the real live Brady Bunch, which was a play which included women and men that were adults wearing bad 70s clothes and bad 70s hair, and they reenacted Brady Bunch episodes word for word. It was a play that was really successful in Chicago, then it moved to New York, and then it came to LA, and that's when I met these guys. And when they found out that I did Brady Bunch stuff in my stand-up act, they invited me to direct a production of the real live Brady Bunch in Sydney, Australia. And I didn't know what to say because I'd never directed a play before. But I thought, maybe this is a faith journey for me because I just started coming back to church and developing an adult relationship with God. So I decided to go to Sydney, Australia, direct the Real Life Brady Bunch, and bring several of my pantsuits with me because that way Mrs. Brady could wear a different one every time she entered the stage. So yes, it was... What can I say? Oh, yes. Whew, I don't know what to do. I'm feeling all fizzy and fuzzy. Yes, and you know, our show was a hit. The Sydney reporters called us a nostril-flaring rumpus. Even my pantsuits, yeah. You don't ever want those to leave, do you? When John comes back, he won't know it hit him, that there's pantsuits everywhere in this church. It was fantastic. And you know, I had such a great time turning heathens into Bradys that I thought maybe it was time for me to turn Aussies into Bradys. It was time for me to turn heathens into Christians, or at least regular churchgoers into more enthusiastic members of the finance committee. So I decided to answer this crazy call to ministry that I'd experienced a couple years before out in the desert on Good Friday, and I went to seminary where I learned all this new scholarship about how the Bible and comedy are related, and I got to start my own improv troupe called Angelic Residue and do sorts of things when I became a pastor, like do potlucks for peace and preach about how God is like a pantsuit. Yeah, baby. I'm sure just looking here, you don't have to have me explain to you how God is like a pantsuit. But just in case you do, this is so obvious. God, like a pantsuit, is made of vibrant, fantastic colors and fabrics and shapes and sizes, isn't it? And God, like a pantsuit, has feminine and masculine characteristics. And God, like a pantsuit, fits everybody and moves just the way you want. It moves with everybody, with everything they do. Yeah. And the very best thing about pantsuits is that they're made out of polyester, the eternal fabric. You can bury a pantsuit in the ground, pull it up, dust it off, 2,000 years later, it's good to go. Just like God. When I think about actually, you know, my journey in my adult life, in my career life, and how crazy and creative and truly comical it all has been, beyond what I could ever have made up, and I make up a lot of crazy, creative, comical things, I think about how it all came out of Valentine's Day. The thing in my life that I most hated, that I most dreaded, that I most felt embarrassed and gross about, the thing that I didn't want anybody else to ever have to go through, except maybe a Brady. Out of that very, very, very worst thing in my life, in my world, came the beyond best thing. And that is the biblical understanding of Easter. That is actually the biblical understanding of resurrection. It's not about how Jesus rose from the dead. It's not about how we now, because of Jesus rising from the dead, get eternal life because we think and believe and do the right things. Easter is about brand new, fantastic, beyond imagining life coming from the cross, which in the ancient world would have been the most hated, the most shameful, the most embarrassing, the most gross place that nobody ever, ever, ever would want to be found on, that no God even would ever, ever, ever want to be found on. In the ancient world, there's lots of stories about gods who come to earth and die and rise again. There's nothing new in the Christian story about that. But what Christians were saying is, no, God came to earth, died, and rose from the cross, from this most disgusting, shameful place that nobody even ever liked to talk about. In fact, you may not know this, but the first bit of art in the Christian world was an editorial graffiti cartoon that shows a cross with a person hanging on it with a donkey head. That is how asinine, how totally foolish the Christian story was. But we know from our experience that it's out of that foolishness that this crazy, life-giving, beyond imagining wisdom comes from. And that we never have to be afraid about those harsh, cruel, grotesque, embarrassing places in our lives, the craziness and harshness and grotesqueness of our world that seems so hopeless that we wish we never had to come upon, that we had to ever know about. Those are the places where God's resurrection is happening and seeking to happen. We don't know where it's going to go or what crazy, creative, comical way it's going to move. God said the Spirit moves like the breath, and we don't know where it's going, and we never, ever, ever have to worry about what we're bringing out of our closet, because it's going to be something amazing. That's a promise that we have in the Bible. That's a promise I can share to you, that our pantsuits share to you. Good news for us all. Now, I have a little addendum to my story. You may be, well, so what happened next, Jane? Well, I did meet somebody. I met a very special fella, a guy that I could cuddle with, I could have some special Valentine's days with. And where did I meet him? Well, I met him at a costume party, a fundraiser. The theme was Walk on the Wild Side. And because I was now a pastor, I always like to have my costumes have a little bit of theological understanding in them. So I came as the devil in a blue pantsuit. That's right. That was the pantsuit I was wearing. That's what my fella saw first when he met me. And it was love, or at least intense like at first sight. And my friends say, of course, Jane, of course the person for you would meet while you were wearing a pantsuit, and that's why he would fall in love with you. And I say, well, if you ask him, he'll say, the first thing I noticed and was attracted to about you was your tail. That relationship ended, but but you know what? Big deal. I don't even care anymore, because I've come to learn that the path of God is so wonderful, so beyond imagining. We have nothing to be afraid about. Bring on the next leg of the journey for all of us, because we know that we travel with a God who is so full of love, who is so full of peace, who is so full of joy, and best of all, who always has plenty of goodwill. Thanks be to God. Amen. Let's swirl around.